Hi class. I have been getting a lot of questions about Module 6 Strategic Plan. So I wanted to give you just a quick video to discuss it a little bit, the things I've been discussing with people. I think one of the hardest things for people is if you're in the field of education, especially if you're at a level, even it's true in an organization, where you're not in a leadership position per se, but still working at a lower level position. It might be hard to think about the strategic initiative and what that means. And so let me give a little bit of clarity. A strategic initiative, an organizational initiative, really is anything that has to happen within an organization that may create some kind of change, something that has to be planned for. That's really what you're doing here, is creating a strategic plan. And it has to be something that's going to be long term. If you're just going to change something next quarter or next semester, or you're just going to make a small change, say promote a new vice president or something, that's not really the kind of initiative I'm talking about. The word initiative in and of itself means something that is a long-term plan, an ongoing thing that you want to plan for. So when you're thinking about this initiative, think about things that need to happen long-term. Also think about it from the leader's perspective, not from your own organizational perspective. So, you may be a manager in a division, and you may think, as a manager in the division, I need to improve productivity in my employees. Well, that's a task that you need to do as a manager. That's not a strategic initiative. That's not something that you need to plan for as the kind of scope that I'm talking about for this paper. Instead, think about how would you create a new training program in your division or in your organization. What would be something that would be needed that might help that problem of the productivity, but what would be a bigger kind of thing that might help that? And then you're going to design a plan for that. And in the case of both that kind of plan and an education plan, for example, one student is doing leveling, some kind of leveling thing with students and sorting them out according to their test scores. You don't want to think about a curriculum. You don't want to think about what training classes am I going to provide? What is the information I'm going to provide in the trainings? That's a program design level thinking. We're not going that detailed. Instead, you want to think of it on a larger picture. If you were the leader, if you were the boss, if you were the principal, if you were the superintendent, if you were the vice president or the CEO, how would you construct this initiative? How would you build it so that it gets going within your organization? Within the parts of the assignment, you're going to do a summary of the initiative and what is the need that's inspiring it. Then you're going to look at internal and external influences. Who has a play? Who has a say in this initiative? Who's going to be affected by it, both internally, and then who from the outside of the organization might be affected, or will customers be affected? How will they interplay with this initiative as it's ongoing? And I'm not looking at the results of the initiative. So if you increase productivity, you're going to increase profits and make the shareholders happy. But the initiative itself, as it's going on, who are the external factors that will influence that? Think about things like the cost of it, the money involved in it, who's going to give the okays for it, who's going to give their permission, whose permissions do you need to get? Do you need to hire outside agencies? How will all that impact this initiative? And then you're going to review strategic theory and figure out what are some strategies that you can use in order to get this going in your organization. What kind of things are you going to need to think about based on the theory that you've been reading? And that's section 3. Then you're going to create the actual plan, and the plan is a table. It's going to be linear, and it's going to be the steps that you need to go to get this initiative going. Is there going to be a planning phase? What's going to go into the planning phase? Is there going to be an execution phase? Is there going to be trainings that need to happen? What are the resources that you're going to need? What are the specific actions that you're going to take? Based on the theory that you've learned, what are some of the things you need to add into your plan to make sure things happen smoothly, to make sure things flow smoothly? And then the timeline is what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen next month, what's going to happen next year. And when you're thinking about that, also think about follow-up. How are you going to know that you've been successful? What kind of follow-up activities might you want to do? And again, that's based on what you've been learning about strategic planning. And that's really the bulk of the paper is going to be that table, which is not going to be really detailed. The table is just going to have kind of ideas in it and talk about the steps and things you're going to do. You don't need to really flesh that out and be super detailed, because again, you're not planning at the detailed level. This is a plan. So really you're looking at the steps you would take and the things you would need. And keep in mind as well that the final paper is going to take this plan and talk about its execution. You know, it's going to talk about when you take the plan that you have and put it out there in the organization, how are you going to get that going? What's going to happen? What are some of the barriers? What are some of the possible things that might prevent you from doing this? How are you going to communicate about the initiative? And let me be clear on this. In your strategic plan, you're going to have to talk about communication and the communications that will go out as part of the strategic plan. For the final paper, you'll be talking about how are you going to communicate about the plan to your people. And if you read in Shine, you'll know that it's important in any kind of organizational change that you communicate what that change is about before the change starts to happen, before the initiative starts to happen. What would your communication be like? So again, that's kind of how we're situating in this situation here. This situating in the situation, that's terrible. This is how this is situated in the class and the scope of the project. The first paper was looking at the organization and looking at the needs and problems and issues within the organization. The next paper is looking at the plan that you're going to make. The final paper is, again, how will you execute that? Now, I am aware as well, in some of the feedback that I've been getting on the mid-quarter survey, which if you haven't done it, please do it, that, you know, this may overlap papers you have in other classes. Keep in mind that this is a big program and there are many classes being offered at the same time. I don't know what papers you might have that overlap, so always let me know in advance when you have an issue of papers overlapping, and we can see what we can do about it to ease that for you. Typically what I would say is, well, start the paper a week early. But in the case of if you need to have certain materials that are in the modules, you may need to start it a week. We may need to plan for it a week late. But you need to let me know about that, otherwise there's nothing I can do. So that's it for this week. Let me know if you have any further questions. I want to do a webinar, and I think I'm going to plan for a Thursday webinar at 5:30. So I'm going to get that set up, and I'll post an announcement about that, and we can talk a little bit more about what's going on in the class and answer any questions that you might have. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and good luck on this next paper.